Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Marc Boudria. He's the VP of Science and Technology at HyperGiant. Marc, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going, Kevin?
I'm very well. Yourself?
I'm doing pretty good.
That's
Enjoying
awesome.
A nice, cool day.
Yeah. You're in Austin, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Austin,
Great
Texas.
city. Great city. I've been there a couple of times. Always had a blast. But maybe before we get into all the stuff that you guys are doing at HyperGiant, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Sure, sounds great. All right, so I was born in southeastern Massachusetts,
Okay.
city named Fall River, but I still have a lot of family in southeastern Mass.
Sure.
But I grew up most of my life in New York, just
Okay.
north of the city in the Hudson Valley.
Okay.
And spent about a number of years there, and then I lived up in Albany and Schenectady for a while, and then moved out to Adventures West.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So you have kind of an interesting take on post-secondary education, university. Do you want to talk about that journey and what choices you made, and then let's get into your career right after that? Does that sound good?
Sure. I always like to tell people that the one thing I'm super qualified to do in a lot of situations is tell you what not to do, because I've probably made
That's
those
good advice.
mistakes.
Sure.
I've definitely taken the path less traveled.
Okay.
I got out of high school, just went to a local community college for a bit, and my interests were just always varied. I grew up in a very lucky to be exposed to a lot of technology very, very, very early, more so than most.
Okay. Very cool.
And that sort of scale on top of that. So while I fought going into the sort of world that I'm in now,
Okay. Interesting.
So I got out, did a little bit of time in school, and then I was working professionally in the photography industry,
Okay.
actually. And that's kind of where my a lot of my technical background sort of started, is not necessarily in the taking of pictures, but in the processes that surround them, and the darkroom processes and manipulation of light and image and everything else.
Sure.
I started a lighting company
Okay.
with a few people, and did lights in the sort of underground and club scene in New York City and all over the Northeast, doing shows, and
That
that
must have been a
evolved
blast.
into, I have a lot of stories to show for it.
Sure.
That's about all I have to show for any of that life. And then I kind of spent a lot of time doing music things and in sound design, and then I sort of bit the bullet and went and got into kind of tech land. And so I started many, many, many years ago, and you were either a software person or a hardware person, and
Sure.
I started life out as a hardware person, and
Okay.
working on mainframes and supporting banks and networks, and that evolved into network engineering. And through all of that, I was annoyed that most of my peers didn't quite understand how the operating system worked and how the the software side of it worked, and people I knew on the software side really just weren't really too hip on a lot of the hardware issues. So
Sure.
I kind of moved into it with a good friend of mine, and him and I just dove into the coding thing, and we sort of backed into a lot of this stuff. And back in the early days, it was a lot of looking at, decompiling an executable and staring at assembly language and just trying to make sense of it all. Granted, yeah, you go to school and learn a lot of that stuff, but that just wasn't for me. So everything that sort of evolved over the years through this has just been experimentation. And in fact, my career has really spent most of my time in the R&D space, just trying to make things say hello world. And through all of that,
Awesome.
Math is a thing, and AI has been a thing for a really long time. Very, very little of this was new.
Sure.
We were using machine learning algorithms, back in the early 90s to do synchronization of sound and music and visuals to beat, and just to have cool stuff. Now that's a fun and not necessarily industry use case, but understanding how to use that tech, thing.
Sure.
And so it's all sort of evolved through that. And then, finding my way to Chaotic Moon, and to Ben and Fremont and Womble, was probably like the single biggest change in my life.
Okay. Very cool.
Recent memory. And Worley, and, just that whole crew. That was a really magical time. And they, accepted a rogue into their midst and, leveraged its power ever since. And there's nobody else that I'd rather be around at this stage in my career. It's not about the money. It's about the people I work with.
No, that's very cool. So walk us through what you guys do and why do you say that? Because you've obviously done a ton of stuff. You worked with a ton of people. And when you find those people that you basically can create magic with, it's so rare that you're right. It's the money just doesn't matter.
I agree. It changes the game. No longer are you just trying to tread water and do the task at hand. It's okay. We accept that we've got this pool of ability now.
Sure.
It's become the norm. There's nothing that we can't go tackle because we never attack anything from a single point. It's always from, 4 or 5 points of attack, and everybody has a different skill to bring to bear on it. And when you find leadership that A, recognizes the strengths of that, and B, the people who embrace that, it's a really powerful experience. I think all too often, you're hired into a role in a lot of companies and they pocket you away because that was how things were done in the 40s and 50s and 60s with
Sure.
operational efficiencies and blah, blah, blah. But you lose the essence of why we hire anybody at any business, and the business has problems to solve. And so no problem is ever solved from a single direction.
Sure.
It's not a solution that's from a single direction. You prove an hypothesis from a single direction. So finding that and working for them is very empowering. And, I can't do any of what I do without the amazing people around me. I'm nothing.
That's very interesting. So before we dive a little bit deeper into what exactly your role is, what exactly does HyperGiant do, and what made you actually start there with them, other than what you kind of just mentioned, great people? But you got to be passionate about the work as well, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. You have to. And I think at some level, and I think everybody has some level of comfort in it, but doing what we do, being sort of agnostic problem solvers.
Okay.
Let's start there, right? So there's HyperGiant Industries underneath that, Space Age Solutions, which is essentially what we're talking about. But HyperGiant Industries is Space Age Solutions, Sensory Sciences, which is a whole different group. Dave Kops and his team building an amazing piece of technology. And then we've got Galactic Systems, doing satellite stuff and work in space and various other things. And the list kind of moves on. That's the other thing that we do is HyperGiant Industries, but from a focus of Space Age Solutions, which is, really kind of at the heart of it all. We solve problems for customers, and we solve those problems through two lenses: the lens of machine intelligence and user experience. In order to create a stable solution to any problem in business, there are 3 points of entry, right?
Okay.
You're either solving for a business problem, you're solving for some user, or you're solving for some data. Regardless of which one of those points you start with, you have to solve for the other two.
Okay.
In order to create that nice, stable, sort of naturally occurring pyramid shape. And we do that in a lot of different ways. It takes on a lot of different forms for a lot of different companies.
Okay.
HyperGiant breaks down into sort of 3 kind of tiers of effort. And you have the consultancy aspect of it, helping companies understand, how do we apply these technologies? How do I make not just an incremental change, but how do I make a systemic change that sets me up for the next 100 years?
Sure.
And how do I get actionable things right now to help justify the costs of being able to do that? Then there's the technology side, and how helping to realize and sort of ossify ideas and pragmatic functions into existence.
Okay.
And then there's the sciences side of things. How can we go attack a hypothesis, go research what's possible, advance something in a way that maybe, wasn't necessarily thought of. And that's kind of one of the superpowers of HyperGiant.
Sure.
And why somebody comes to us is that because we are agnostic to technology and because we are agnostic to industry, it puts us in a unique position to take so much of what we learn from other places and abstractly apply it in a meaningful way to another industry. And, our depth of understanding on the consumer side of things leads to building better oil and gas interfaces.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Those our understanding of what humans are doing in other places. And I think this represents sort of like why HyperGiant exists, is because all this new, quote unquote, new tech really is a philosophical shift in how you solve a problem, how you set your infrastructure up, how you think about your data, how do you transform that into endpoint experiences. These things are different now than they were even a few years ago. The evolution towards this path was happening, but it wasn't until compute power sort of democratized and libraries reached a point of stability and sort of the math matured that surrounded these things and the understanding of it, that we're able to actually go and do a lot of these things today that we couldn't do yesterday.
Sure. No, I think that's really great. So do you want to maybe give me a bit of an overview on, you quickly covered it, but the types of projects you guys have worked on? I know you, like, with what you can say, because I know sometimes when you're deep into a company, you can't even really mention you're working with that company, right?
Yeah, so I could talk in some broad strokes here.
Sure.
We obviously are Texas-based, and we would be fools to ignore what's in our backyard. Right. So a large part of our work is in the oil and gas industry.
Okay. Sure.
Much of it in the upstream, right? So you've got upstream, midstream, downstream.
Sure.
We do some stuff on the downstream as well. A lot of it on the upstream.
Okay.
Making more effective task optimizations and assignments for various companies.
Okay.
Visualizing information in richer ways, doing more predictive data science on the time series data that's available, whether it be maintenance, completions, optimal completion paths, things like that. We spend a lot of time there. We've got a lot of experience in the sort of quick service restaurant world, both on the ordering and in-store experiences. We've got a lot of work in the sort of HR space and things that surround hiring and humans and optimization of things. There are a lot of common threads that run through all of these, and that is fixing user experiences, making things far more usable and with less friction, and doing proper data science and beginning to lay the foundations for what a contemporary data stack needs to be in order to enable them to actually do this stuff repeatably in the future.
Sure. No, I think that's actually really interesting. And you mentioned something earlier in our conversation that I really want to go back to is this stuff isn't really new. Like you mentioned earlier, you've been playing with a lot of this stuff that has become really popular and, for lack of a better term for it, a bunch of buzzwords lately. But some of this stuff has really been around for decades now, and we're just starting to really have the hardware and software to actually do some of this stuff. But what is your thoughts on the state of kind of AI and machine learning and even kind of just software development at this point? Because there's so many things and buzzwords floating around nowadays. And it's like, well, some people are saying they're doing this stuff, or like, oh, look at all this AI we have. And it's like, well, is it really AI, or are you just calling it that? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is certainly a literal definition of AI, but at the end of the day, AI is a very broad term. It's not a singular thing. It's a tapestry of things. If we think of a tapestry, if a thing's made of thread, all of the different techniques and approaches make up the threads. And you can make a single colored tapestry, or you can have a rainbow dream coat tapestry of things. So, I mean, like, there are so many things that are not necessarily new that sort of fall into, like, computer vision. Computer vision has been around a really long time. I mean, the conveyor belt sorting thing, not new. If you go to pretty much any sort of embedded industrial conference, you'll see 15 of them.
Yeah. Okay.
And you have seen them for the last few decades.
Sure.
I think it's really more different now is a democratization of that stuff.
Okay. Interesting.
Much of the technique in the library available, like even a few years ago, in the past in the R&D team, just because a library on GitHub said it did XYZ doesn't mean that it did it outside of that lab condition.
Interesting.
Right? You use their data set, you use their things, and boom, magic happens.
Yep.
Now you go to put your data through it, and you don't get any of those results. And that was a lot of the case in the past. But, early alpha, it's no different working with anything alpha. And I think we've sort of moved a little bit into advanced beta on a lot of these things. But, I think the part that gets missed here is that there has to be a user experience that accompanies these things.
Yeah.
This is not magic. It just happens on the back end. Sure. Because AI does one thing really, really well, and that is accelerate chaos from point A to point B.
You're right, yeah.
And so right now, our enterprise is just loaded with artificial gates to the process. And they're gates because a human could only do XYZ transactions a day and issue X number of invoices, right? Like even big, giant companies, these gates exist. They're things. And the system is built around those gates. And so now you go dropping a whole bunch of RPA in and you break down those gates. And sure, you get rid of some people, but now the people that are at the other end of that pipe now have more to deal with, or they don't know, there's no visualization into how many errors is this bot transacting on. I don't know.
Sure.
Right. So
interesting.
You can't have, there's no removing the human from this. This whole talk of all of this is just nonsense. And I think that speaks a lot to kind of what's happening right now. I think the people that work in the industry and kind of live this life look at almost every single news story and are just frustrated because it's
agreed.
Things talking about like, but they don't go out and learn on their own, right? Like that's not how the model works. It's not how that math works. It's not this. And you just get exhausted trying to counter all of that stuff. I mean, that's why the reality is, let's call it what it is, machine intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, the moment I say that term to you, tell me it didn't draw a totally different vision than when I say AI to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, interesting, right? Yeah, you're totally right about that, right? I think in my opinion, it sounds like you're going to agree with me, is it's going to automate certain simple tasks, and it might remove some of your workload with those, small tasks. But you're right. You still need a human being to do majority of the stuff, and it will be like that for decades if we ever replace a human, right?
Yeah. I mean, I run into, and not just I, but we as HyperGiant, and in my career forever, people with large, educations, and they're very intelligent.
Sure.
These could be true knowledge workers.
Yeah.
But they spend 70% of their time copying and pasting to spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Why do we want to keep those jobs? Why?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody's asking so AI is going to replace jobs, blah, 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 blah. Do we want to keep those? Is that the best use of a human who has schooling? And even if they don't, look, good ideas can come from everywhere.
Yep. Agreed.
Let's use the humans to be knowledge workers and create and deal with the fringe, because the machine handles the normalcy, the repetitive task 1,000% better than human ever will. So cool. Let it do that. It'll also identify the anomalies.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now let the humans deal with the anomalies.
Sure.
Now we can build a reinforcement layer where we see if a reoccurring anomaly has a repetitive way of answering it, and therefore regress that learning into the model. And so now we have one less anomaly we're detecting.
Yeah.
And we continue that pattern over time, and the machine gets better and better and better. But you're never going to get rid of the human. Somebody still has to deal with the shit that the machine doesn't know.
Yeah. Well, no, I think the best is the medical space, right? If a human can go through a bunch of x-rays, the machines can go through thousands of x-rays in minutes and pick out, this person might have an issue that needs dealt with, then you have a physical doctor look at those issues, and it could be maybe 10 or 5 out of those 1,000 instead of the doctor sitting through 1,000, right?
Yeah, it just narrows down and says, here, I've looked at a bunch of stuff. Of this, these are the ones that I find are not noise.
Yeah.
Now, it's the machine's job to detect anomaly and find correlation, never assign causality.
Sure. Interesting.
And I think
Agreed.
that's a big misunderstanding that, arrives here. And a lot of that could be thwarted with basic education. That's a whole nother podcast.
Sure. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's actually quite fascinating that you bring that up, because I think that's the thing is in my opinion, in a lot of cases, education has little to do, traditional college degree has little to do with how successful somebody will or won't be in their career or in their life. There's people that have been wildly successful with little to no education, and people that have the most education on the planet, and everywhere in between. It really, in my experience, and they don't really correlate in a lot of cases.
I think, a lot of it comes down to just, were you ever taught how to take something from an abstract theory and make it exist in the real world?
Sure.
Right? And make it be a thing. And just that basic act of creation, from nothing to something,
sure,
should be what all things are driving towards.
Yeah.
Because along the way, there's need for specialty and learning and understanding. And that's a big struggle. We just wrapped up teaching a class last semester at UT.
Okay.
Designing for AI. It was a credit course. And, it was hard.
Sure.
Way more work than I expected to be. The other people on the team who were professors actually before being at HyperGiant, sort of warned us. But the reality is, we went through it. I feel like everybody got a lot out of it. But the thing that we spend a lot of time doing is sort of breaking down the barriers that education has put into people's minds. Okay, so
sure,
you're good at math, so you're going to be engineering, and you're going to think like this. And you like to draw, you're going to be design, and you're going to be like this. And You like business, you're going to be like this. And the reality is all of those things are valid.
Yeah.
They're not siloed. When you come work for a place like HyperGiant, the first thing we do is smash that all together, because that's how a problem is actually turned into a solution. You know?
Agreed.
And I don't think enough of that sort of project mentality is taught like that. Everything is taught like engineers are going to do their thing. And then that's, our design's going to do their thing, and they're going to hand it off to engineering. And then engineering's going to do their thing, and they're going to hand it off to here. That was maybe the way the process was 20 years ago, but that's why we got a whole bunch of utilitarian crap now.
Yeah.
That's not the way that things work in the Agile world. The way that, when mobile applications came around, that really changed the game.
Yeah.
For speed reasons and a lot of other reasons. Those of us on the R&D side, before mobile came around, were sort of, toying and playing in that rapid application development space. But most everything else in the enterprise was very structured, and everything was boxcard.
Yeah.
You can't be like that. That's not the reality of it. So I always push against and say, it's not STEM, it's STEAM.
Okay.
Because that iPhone in everybody's pocket started life as a pretty picture, not as a circuit board.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't create technology without art. There's going to be a user involved. Somebody's going to have to look at it. And it has to mean something. And it has to fit into the moment of time that they're looking at it and provide information. And not a single role can provide that answer. Multiple roles need to provide it.
Yeah, 100% agree. The other thing I'm curious to get your thoughts on, I didn't tell you this earlier, but I work on the design side. I'm actually at a startup up in Canada. I've been kind of doing design and UX and stuff for decades now. The one thing that I've struggled with sometimes, dealing with other kind of designers sometimes, is they're always trying to design like version 87, and in Agile, there potentially will never be like you will never get to that version, right? You might get to version 87, but you can't be thinking like you need to build an interface that obviously you can add stuff to and thinking. But if you have the time and budget to build something in 3 months, you can't build something from the design side that's going to take you 3 years to implement, right? Like that. Like, do you know where I'm going with that, or what are your thoughts
totally
kind of around that?
So that's exactly why from pre-day one, before when we sit down to even estimate a project,
right?
So I'm out with business development. We identify an opportunity with somebody.
Sure.
We bring that back, and sort of the heads of state of product strategy, product development, product design, and science and technology sit down and talk through what it is and determine complexity and understanding, and because we're sort of a fixed fee shop,
right?
So our word is our bond in that world, and if we get it wrong, we're not in a good way.
Yeah. So
right from day one, or before day one, everybody's involved in that conversation, because during that first couple of weeks when we're doing discovery and defining and mocking things up, the solution architect's job is to sort of be the gut check of the computer science of all of this.
Right.
How does this, well, you can't do that because React doesn't allow for that, or we can't do that. How are we going to get this cool Python thing that data science is experimenting with? Now, how am I going to make it do that 1,000,000 times a second?
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Oh, well, if they architected it like this, well, then I can't do it like that. And if design's trying to do something that doesn't make sense, everybody has to have a voice in it. So that's how we counter it.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of part of the process. Like, everybody at any point can sort of hit the panic button and raise a concern.
Yeah, it actually kind of surprises me at how many, whether it's actually building custom software or people are building their own app, don't actually bring in everybody, or at least a couple of people from every vertical in a company, into the boardroom and almost argue it out on a whiteboard before any real design's actually done or code's really written. because you basically need to all those verticals, and you need to come up with a solution that works obviously long term, but also immediate, and respecting all the different verticals and the challenges inside those verticals.
Absolutely. I mean, that basically describes our LOE meetings.
Yeah.
They get heated. Everybody expresses themselves, and then it ends with a hug, and we walk out. Still friends, but maybe not in the middle of a meeting.
But it's good though, right? When you have passionate people,
it's healthy that way,
arguing their point of view, because nothing's worse than either a designer giving a developer designs and saying build this, or a developer building something and say design around this. If the two just talked before either one did anything, it would have been way quicker, better, and it would probably cause, well, it always, in my case, has always caused less kind of rework on both sides, really.
Yeah. No, the projects that run the best are the clients that are open to bidirectional communication, meaning, yes, they have an opinion, but they are open to hear somebody give them direction for us to be consultative to them versus them saying, well, this is the way that we envision it, and period, end of story.
Sure.
Those are the ones that always go to that. Now, as you work in sort of niche markets, that gets less and less, because the realities are somebody might know best. But when it comes to the actual implementation paths and how these things express themselves, this is something we have done in a plethora of over the last few companies, in fact.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. No, interesting. So I'm curious, though, to dive a little bit deeper into your thoughts on the industry as a whole, because so many companies these days say we use this technology and we'll just they never say this outright, but we'll make it work with whatever technology. You mentioned earlier that you guys are it sounds like you guys will pick a technology that fits the problems you're trying to solve than trying to mash the problem into the technology that you guys have picked, a long time ago.
Exactly. We don't ever walk into a room with the pitch of, boy, do we have a tech for you, without even having talking to them. Now, there are plenty of large system integrators that are very, very large, publicly traded companies.
Sure.
They'll spend hours having a pre-meeting about what are we going to go in and sell to this customer.
Yep.
And I worked for those people.
Sure.
Well, I would sit in the room and go, but we don't know anything. Well, we know their business. I'm like, I get it. You do their BPO.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you know. So why can't we just have a conversation? They're human. We're human. Do that. And they spend all this upfront time trying to do it. And, the HyperGiant approach is a very organic sort of thing. And the reality is, where is your pain?
Yeah. Interesting.
There's not anything I can't help you with that you don't have money for anyway, but let's just talk about the pain. Let's leave out a particular solution. It's more of a counseling session right now.
Sure.
Talk, and let's empathize and get an understanding, because we've experienced tons of pain ourselves. And the moment that I can empathize with you is the moment that I make a better connection with you.
Sure.
And when I do that, then we have better communication. And then I can get to the root of what your problem is, because just because you're experiencing the pain in one place doesn't mean that's the cause of the pain.
Yeah, interesting.
Any doctor will tell you that,
Yep.
So let's talk through your pain. It's something that one of us, we've got tons of experience collectively that we can draw upon and maybe shine some light through the fog here and arrive at something that we can together go attack, right? We can't do this alone for anything that we do for anybody. We need our clients to kind of manifest their ideas. We are here to make them look good, to stand them up, to solve business problems. to show them the light that there is a better way than the way that it's been done for the last 2 decades.
Sure. And in your thoughts, how much client involvement do you guys kind of expect? Because in my opinion, I think a lot of times clients don't realize how much involvement they need to be, at least throughout the project. Maybe not every day, but weekly or every, couple times a month or something like that. What's your thoughts on how much time a client needs to be involved in the project?
So again, it's one of those things that can vary. We've got sort of the gamut. We have ones that are once a week sort of touch in.
Okay.
We know what's being done the next week. We're on our sort of cadence and we're doing our thing. We have others that are part of the daily stand-up.
Okay, sure.
And are very involved. Most of our projects, we're working alongside an internal team.
Okay.
Who's maybe standing up an API
Gotcha.
as we're building the front end, or we are consulting on standing up the API and they're doing some database work
Gotcha.
to drive and connect to that. So we try and configure and work pretty closely. We have other ones where, it's communal chat rooms and it's moment to moment access to each other
right.
as well.
Okay. So it really depends. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
No. So no, go ahead. Sorry.
No. You're good. Keep going.
Well, I was going to ask, you recently became the VP of Science and Technology. So how has your role evolved at HyperGiant over the last, you've been there almost 2 years now?
Yeah. I've been here on day one.
Very cool.
So, yeah, basically, my life has gotten, early on, it was myself and somebody, spreading time with my lead data scientist and my head of R&D at that time, trying to manage projects and get things done while they were also doing production work. And I'm out on the front side of the business doing those things. It was a lot of load. We've really, as we've been able to age and grow up, my role's sort of been divided into 3.
Okay.
And so one person, generally Mike Roberts, has taken over as the VP of AI.
Okay.
And then we've got Daniel Hobb, who is taken over as the head of R&D. And so their role lives within the spectrum of vision, theory, execution.
Okay.
They're focused on the production, the day-to-day running of the team, keeping things going. My job sits on the vision theory side of things, is paired up as Daniel and I both, and Mike to some extent too, also do double duty as solution architects.
Okay.
And so I'm the only one that sort of does the business development sort of in anger, as
Okay.
PK would say. It's easier that way for me to be out and freeze them all up to kind of focus on the day-to-day production of things.
Right.
So they are far better suited than I
Got you.
to do that stuff. So I pair up with the BizDev team, and I'm out on the road most of the week,
Okay.
helping find business and identify business and scope things and bring that stuff back to the teams and help pass on tribal knowledge and help get things estimated.
Sure. So you guys have 2 or 3 offices in Texas.
So currently we have 2. We just closed on an office in Dallas. Our headquarters is in Austin, and we will be standing up Houston offices soon. We have a number of people already working out of Houston.
Okay.
I spend a large part of my life in Houston.
Okay.
And I've got, we've got the whole Dave Kopp's team, some of the data science team, CEO and CTO, all based in Dallas.
Right. So how do you find, and what advice do you give for people that work with remote teams? Because it can be really tricky or it can go really well. It seems like there's not really a middle ground there. People either say it's the worst thing I've ever done or it's great, I love it, and we just make it work. Like, where's your stance on that?
I fully agree with you. It's the kind of thing that, like, some people thrive in it.
Mm-hmm.
And others it just doesn't work for them. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the reality of it. For us, I don't know that there's a single magic formula. It's something that we are always experimenting with. We try and do as much sort of outreach and all hands and company meetings where everybody meets sort of virtually and is sharing in some experience. We of course live in our chat windows, getting everything accomplished. I think at the end of the day, when you've got people who are professional and they understand the process, and I think one of the big mistakes that I've seen, and I can't say that, I don't know anybody who's not made it, is you hire somebody that's remote because you need them for a project and you're really excited about them and they got a lot of potential. And then before they're actually truly on board and have spent any time at sort of the home base, they're on a client project.
Okay, interesting.
And they have no exposure to the processes and how things are. And so now you've added the weight of the project on top of the weight of just the stress of just getting onboarded anywhere. And it's a dangerous cocktail that leads to explosion more often than not.
Yeah.
I think documenting that process and spending a lot of time to sit and understand with somebody and kind of give them a little bit of a handhold through that. When we've been able to do that stuff, I think that's when we have better examples. And us bringing on Steve Fish recently, is a big part in our desire to get even better at that part.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually quite fascinating. So you guys recently won a couple awards at the Media Excellence Awards. I don't know how much you can talk about the actual projects, but if you can, do you want to quickly mention the two projects and why you think an award show like that is actually really relevant to the industry right now?
So I can't go too much into the project
okay,
per
that's
se,
what I thought.
But I can talk about as far as the view of the awards. Look, everybody needs some way to expose the good work that they're doing. And, being out there and putting your name out there and getting brought into an award thing and winning that award, and even just going through the process of it and being exposed to the other people that you're running against, I think provides a lot of good market value. And, anything you can ever do that creates content that you can leverage and slice and dice. And so you have your sort of slow drip of new content happening and coming out and your name is bubbling up. It's just really important for any business that's trying to get started,
Sure.
And in tech land, that's really hard. There's a crap ton of companies that all on the surface seem to do the same sorts of things. But once you pry beyond that, and awards help kind of pry beyond that, you can see that there's something different there. I mean, I don't know a lot of companies that can sit down and build you a mobile application or launch a satellite into orbit.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's find me another.
No, fair enough.
You know what I'm saying? So in that sense, HyperGiant is a very unique entity in what it is, and it speaks to how we hire, the people that we hire, the people that make us up are what make us unique.
Sure.
And it's nice to get awards that sort of call that out.
Sure. It's also cool, in my opinion anyway, to see what other people are doing as well, right? Because it almost, at least in my case, inspires you to do better, right? And just be better. And, and knowing what other people are doing. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. No, that's cool, man. But we're kind of coming to the end of the show. So let's close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and HyperGiant.
Sure. You can find all of us at hypergiant.com. We've got lots of white papers. Our Medium page on HyperGiant is loaded with great content and sort of thought pieces and vision into who and what makes up HyperGiant. You follow us on Twitter, Instagram. Find me on LinkedIn. And Yeah, that's better. All my socials get funneled through HyperGiant. So
Very cool. Well, Marc, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
it's my pleasure. Thanks so much. And you have a great day too.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.